On July 2, 1881, at 9:30 a.m., at the 6th Street Railroad Station in Washington, D.C., President James A. Garfield was shot by Charles J. Guiteau, a failed lawyer and bill collector. Guiteau was a member of the utopian religious sect known as the Oneida Community, founded by John Humphrey Noyes in Oneida, New York, in 1848. The community believed in perfectionism, that Jesus Christ had already returned in the year 70, making it possible for them to bring about Christ's kingdom themselves and be free of sin and perfect in this world, not just heaven. They shared property and possessions and had unorthodox sexual practices. Guiteau never fit in. He left the group after 5 years and obtained his law license in Chicago. Soon his interest turned to politics. He wrote a speech called Grant versus Hancock, which he revised to Garfield versus Hancock after Garfield won the Republican presidential nomination in 1880. Ultimately, he changed little more than the title and replaced Grant's achievements with Garfield's. The speech was delivered twice, and copies were passed out to members at the Republican National Committee at their 1880 meeting in New York. After the election, Guiteau believed himself to be largely responsible for Garfield's victory. He insisted, as reward for his vital assistance, he should be granted an ambassadorship. His requests to the president and cabinet members were continually rejected. On May 14, 1881, he was finally told personally by Secretary of State James G. Blaine never to return. Soon after, Guiteau decided that God had commanded him to kill the ungrateful president. Knowing little about firearms, he borrowed $15 and purchased a .442 Webley British Bulldog revolver. Guiteau wanted one with ivory grips because it would look good as a museum exhibit after the assassination, but could not afford the extra dollar. President Garfield was shot that hot July morning by the self-proclaimed stalwart of the stalwarts. Garfield would have survived had the doctors not inserted their unsterilized fingers into the wound, probing for the bullet. This caused infection and blood poisoning, for which at the time there were no antibiotics. President Garfield died at 10:35 p.m. on Monday, September 19, 1881, having lingered bedridden with fevers, extreme pain, and bronchial pneumonia. Not an assassination orchestrated by the Rothschild, Rockefeller, and Morgan interests, but one that no less benefited them. Chester A. Arthur became president and offered Roscoe Conkling an appointment to the U.S. Supreme Court, although it was thought the gesture was merely complimentary. That Conkling was too partisan to make a good justice, and that Arthur was paying back his patron with the honor of nomination. In fact, Conkling and Arthur were so intimately associated that it was feared after President Garfield was assassinated that the killing had been done at Conkling's behest in order to install Arthur as president. On March 13, 1881, Tsar Alexander II was assassinated. Nikolai Rysakov, a young member of the People's Will movement, exploded a bomb under the Tsar's carriage. The bomb didn't kill the Tsar, but a second, tossed by another young member of the movement, Ignacy Hirnowicki, sealed the Tsar's fate. The assassination caused a great setback for the Russian reform movement. Alexander II drafted plans for an elected parliament, or Duma, which were completed the day before he died, but not yet released to the Russian people. Had he lived, Russia might have followed a path to constitutional monarchy instead of the long road of oppression that defined his successor's reign. The first action Alexander III took after his coronation was to tear up those plans. A parliament would not come into fruition until 1905, when Alexander II's grandson, Nicholas II, commissioned the Duma, following extreme pressure on the monarchy as a result of the Russian Revolution of 1905. A second consequence of the assassination was anti-Jewish legislation. A third consequence of the assassination was that suppression of civil liberties in Russia and police brutality burst back in full force after experiencing some restraint under the reign of Alexander II. Alexander II's murder was witnessed firsthand by his son, Alexander III, and his grandson, Nicholas II. Both future Tsars arrested protesters and uprooted suspected rebel groups, creating further suppression of personal freedom for the Russian people. On the night of July 16, 1918, Tsar Nicholas II and his entire family were slaughtered by the Bolsheviks, all executed in the same room, even though they had already abdicated power on March 15, 1917. The family was murdered at the orders of the Rothschilds, who, along with the Rockefellers and the J.P. Morgan banks, had great influence over the Bolsheviks, having supplied them with loans to finance the February 1917 revolution. This was done not only to gain control of the country of Russia, but as a long-remembered act of revenge against Tsar Alexander II, who sided with President Lincoln in 1864, and his father, Tsar Alexander I, who blocked the Rothschilds' plan for world government in 1815 at the Congress of Vienna, which was later used as the model for the League of Nations and the United Nations.
My fellow citizens, recent events have imposed upon the patriotic people of this country a responsibility and a duty greater than that of any since the Civil War. Then it was a struggle to preserve the government of the United States. Now it is a struggle to preserve the financial honor of the government.
President McKinley is being inaugurated. Here comes the inaugural parade, headed by the famous Black Horse Cavalry, personal escort to the president. The crowds cheer and crane their necks, waiting for the president-elect to appear. Here he is, and with him, President Cleveland. It was on this occasion that he hinted to the nation that war with Spain was threatening, and war came, and victory with it. It was only a few years later that McKinley's illustrious career was cut short by an assassin's bullet. But he had already carved for himself an enduring place in American history.
In 1913, the current and last central bank in America, known as the Federal Reserve, was set up and signed into law by President Woodrow Wilson, who later deeply regretted his actions and stated, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country." In the book, The New Freedom, a call for the emancipation of the generous energies of a people, written in 1913, Wilson wrote, and I quote, "Since I entered politics, I have chiefly had men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the United States in the field of commerce and manufacture are afraid of somebody, are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it." A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is privately concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world. No longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and a vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and the duress of a small group of dominant men.